You're watching Public Comment every Thursdays at 8 a.m. The live stream. Detroit is different and Bridge Detroit. Local politics of Detroit. Welcome back to Public Comment here, hosting Kari Frazier of Detroit is Different with the insightful Malachi Barrett, giving you some information about what's happening with municipal politics of the city of Detroit. Malachi, how you feeling today?
Good morning. I always appreciate the adjectives you are able to come up with for me. It's very nice. Insightful. That's a good one.
Yes. Hey, man, it's a lot of insight needed as we're kicking everything off, jumping right on into things went through. So now there is a Dust Ordinance. Gabriela, Santiago-Romero got everything through. So we're going. And now if you're going to be doing construction, if you're going to be doing concrete mixing, if you're going to be doing demolitions, you need to make sure you're paying attention and have different people inspecting these sites so that we're not harming people. Because guess what? We have very high rates of asthma. We have very poor air quality, like a lot of communities with Black and brown people. And this was something that passed 7-1. Scott Benson was missing in action for this, but that one lone vote surprising me. Coleman Young II, it don't make no sense. We were already kind of talking about this in the re-record of it. You know what I'm saying? Just make sense of this, Malachi.
Yeah, I think, trying to find out what really was driving his decision on this will be interesting. At the table, he had cited that he had a couple of concerns with the language of the ordinance and unintended consequences of how this thing would be enforced, which, fair point. We talk about enforcement a lot on this show. How is the city council actually going to implement policy that they create? The problem was the concerns that he had, seemingly were answered by the legislation itself. I'll get into that in a minute. But what was interesting, last week, he was one of the members who asked to delay the vote on this, as we talked about on the show, to give more time to work with industry and work through concerns. A week later, it was kind of the same conversation that was had. 7-1, he was the lone no vote. He said there were really two main things that he was worried about: enforcement of the ordinance, because fugitive dust, which is basically anything that's released into the air and spread off site. He was concerned about, like, what is the standard for when that crosses the line? Basically, the city has said that it's a 5% opacity rule, which means if it's visible and it's migrating off the premises, that is illegal. Companies get 2 weeks to fix it, or they face a fine. And there's actually B-Seed inspectors who are certified in this. I didn't know that. I was kind of like, oh, wow, this is certification.
Wait. And refer back to last week's public comment. The fines aren't like it's $25,000. I mean, the fines are reasonable, something, and then you get 2 weeks. I think if you have 2 weeks, plus you know what the fines are, I mean, this isn't crazy. And then even the fines will go into like some different ways of dealing with people dealing with challenges of health challenges from environmental air quality. But it seems extremely reasonable,
Yeah, I mean, I don't know what it depends on the size of the business, right? Whether you can eat a fine or not, but it's $500 to $2,000. It increases, it escalates if you're a repeat offender, if you don't fix the issues.
As far as I'm concerned, if you sitting up here putting pollution in the air with whatever demolition, dusting, or whatever you're doing, you should be able to afford 500 to 2 G's. And really, you should get, and if you can't afford the 500 to 2 G's, you need to take that 2-week notice and change your operations. Furthermore, you shouldn't be doing it in the first place. Hopefully, it doesn't even get to the point where people are paying fines. Hopefully, they get the 2-week notice and be like, let me get all this stuff in order because we want to steward and be safe with the community.
Yeah, I think so. What you're speaking to is the balance that council was kind of asked to walk, like the line they were asked to walk between what is going to put the health and safety of residents first in a situation now where we have industry adjacent to neighborhoods all over the city. Majority Black and brown communities are being forced to contend with concrete crushers and other types of facilities that kick up dust, which is not just like dirt in the air. It can be harmful metals or other kinds of like toxic particulates that lead to respiratory issues and high asthma rates and cancers and all these other things that we are finding that people are actually being hospitalized and dying at higher rates because of all that. But let me just say, like, the balance on the other side, some of the concerns that council members were kind of working through was like, how do we do this in a way that's not too prohibitive for business? That's the whole like dichotomy though, is like, are you putting one ahead of the other? Santiago-Romero said, we've been putting business interests above the health of residents for too long, and that's why it's time to really move forward on this.
And really, even like sometimes council says things, it's like, well, what's going on? I mean, Councilmember Young said that concerns about even people mowing their lawns, like, I mean, seriously, for real, like mowing lawns. Come on now, what are we talking about here? You know what I'm saying? Like, sometimes you just wonder, like, what side of the fence are people standing on? And then even when they present the arguments, I guess more for business as opposed to for residents, what are they thinking? You know what I mean? And then even for you business people, I mean, if people are sick and halfway dead, they're not going to be able to patronize your business. So, I mean, come on, man. Like, what are we doing here?
Yeah, I mean, the ordinance like specifically says that it doesn't apply to activities at private residences. So anything you're doing, within smaller units, I think it's like got a carve out for like bigger apartment complexes. But yeah, this ordinance was never going to apply for average residents. Individuals can't even be cited. It's for companies. It's for businesses that are pretty clearly identified in the ordinance.
Yeah.
So it's like, if you, in our reading of the ordinance, which we read, before we do every story to make sure we're understanding things. I mean, I was sitting there realizing that what he was talking about really wasn't a problem in the legislation. He had the law department, legislative policy division, and BC kind of all explain that at the table. And he still voted against it. He suggested delaying the vote again, but actually didn't make a motion to do that. So based on like kind of procedural of how council meetings works, they were able to vote before he actually formally suggested another delay. Santiago-Romero said that people can't really afford to wait while they play politics on this. And
you got that right.
Sometimes things are made a little more complicated than they are, she said. But this has been cooking since 2022. People have been asking for this for a long time, and you ask some residents, it doesn't go far enough. There's as we talked about last week, some people want to see more like monitoring of along the fence line of these businesses and things that like more, stricter rules and fines and things like that.
Yeah, and we spoke a little bit on that last week. Refer to last week's public comment in reference to like some of those monitoring systems from some of the things my community's dealt with. And this is the other side as we get to the next story, kind of from the State House, of why these public-private partnerships are so necessary, right? So y'all see the DDOT bus right there, right? Governor Whitmer's budget falls short on bus funding. So with this, DDOT's going to get a lot less money. This is a tough thing, right? So as what was uplifted in a Detroit is Different that I had with Theo Pride, just talking about the start of the public-private partnerships, a lot of this took place when Black leadership started taking hold in different cities like the city of Detroit. So as Black leadership started taking hold, federal and state money stopped going into these cities, right? So Governor Whitmer's new budget gives the lowest investment to public transportation in decades. That's how you start this off. And this is important because this is running concurrent with the mayor and city council championing, hey, we're getting in all these new drivers. We're making these upgrades to buses, public transit, and DDOT bus systems will be so much better now. Right as this happens, the governor of Michigan snatches away a whole lot more money that would have been there to support these people with new jobs. I mean, it was a pay increase and everything. So it's like these drivers, I'm sure, will be the first people hit hard with this. And this is just very sad. So if the drivers aren't hit hard, what needs to happen, then you're going to have to come up with some private public partnership concept where the private entity will supplement, from the government providing, from the local government or Detroit's government is going to provide some access to some business to try to earn some more money to cover the costs to pay the new drivers. This is sad. This is tragic. This is right after they've just like named the whole new bus station after the guy that passed during COVID. Like, what the hell be going on sometimes? Malachi, break it down.
Yeah, I mean, this is something that we've been watching for a little bit. Governor Whitmer put out her proposed budget a couple of months ago, and it included a pretty significant drop in local bus operating funds, which is like part of the transit funding that gets distributed to transit agencies across Michigan. So it helps fund DDOT as well as bus and transit operations in other cities.
Smart and everything.
Yep. So the council has asked Whitmer and state lawmakers to increase funding, basically to keep up with inflation. She has proposed investing $221 million. The state would need about, 60 million more dollars to keep up with inflation, 285 million. And basically, the council has warned that failure to keep up with inflation would threaten to undo the progress made by DDOT over the last year and potentially force cuts to essential bus services. Like you said, they just got raises approved for the first, not for the first time, but a pretty, important raise was passed that still, doesn't quite get us to where SMART will probably be when their contracts come out. So, we need to do more. City officials have said to increase that pay to keep drivers, to retain drivers, to recruit new drivers, which is really key to, maintaining the number of buses on the road and the frequency that's needed for people to feel more comfortable riding, or that it's more reliable and worthy of riding. So it's all kind of this cycle of like, you need the investment to prove the service works so that people ride it, so that, the investment makes sense, that the service works, and so on and so on. So if the budget, as it is approved, DDOT would get about $10 million less this year, which is interesting because the city increased the budget, which, DDOT is mostly funded by the city. This is kind of a small amount of their funding, but $10 million obviously is pretty significant. DDOT, their budget was increased by $21 million by the city. So basically that 10 million cut from the state chops in half the increase that the city had provided. And overall, DDOT's budget is $188 million. So, it is a fraction of that overall budget, but, everyone, transit activists will say, I mean, all of those dollars are really important. And this represents kind of a step backward in terms of the funding, which I think is really interesting because we're talking so much about regional transportation and the need for public transit in Michigan to, get people to move to urban places.
And let me make this make sense from a business sense. I know people think like, 180 million and you're only losing 10. It shouldn't impact you that much. It does. Because even like most effective boycotts, you're not looking to like topple everything. You just need to impact a little bit of how decisions will be made. A little of how those decisions will be made. Right. So we got to think about everything with DDOT. A lot of that funding goes for like when people give lawsuits against DDOT. A lot of it goes to making sure the maintenance and the upkeep happens. Some of that goes just the functionality of running the routes. And you think about when routes stop. So you'll think of like the increase to it was 21 million. So with that 21 million, you can make extra moves. So let's look at it like your household, right? So let's say your monthly expenses, let's say $5,000, right? So you say, oh man, $500 out of the 5,000, it shouldn't impact you that much. Or let's say $250 out of the 5,000, it shouldn't impact you that much. It could be the difference between a lot of those quality of life decisions that you would make and would not make. So now that barbecue's coming up for Memorial Day, and you were thinking like, okay, yeah, I can go on and crank something out and give this $200 to my family so that we can enjoy our cookout. Nah, that's not happening, right? So now that doesn't happen, that impacts like the other ways you move in. And I know this is like one of those smaller examples, but it plays out throughout the year big time. And this is going to have a direct impact, I think, on a lot of the hiring of some of the new people. That's going to have a direct impact on where things are even leveling out with some of the new bus stations, some of the improvements to the bus stops. It's going to have a direct impact on all of that because you're trying to still catch up. That's the other thing we got to keep in mind. Like the bus system is not where it's supposed to be. So not only do they need this 10 million, they probably need 10 million more. So it probably needs to be like 25 million from the state. So now that 25 or the 21 expansion can match what the city was going to do. So now you got like 42 million, so you can get things functioning in the state of the bus stops. You can get things functioning with the state of the bus stations and so many of the transit systems and really enhance where this is coming from. But, you know.
Yeah, a big unanswered question, I guess, for me is why we're seeing this reduction. So that's something we're gonna have to spend a little bit more time on working on. But City Council getting behind this is pretty significant because Transportation Riders United has been advocating on this. They went up to Lansing yesterday, actually, to talk to the legislature about increasing the bus funding. So yeah, we're gonna see where this goes. There's still some more time for the legislature and the governor to come together on the budget. So we'll see.
All right. So now we're talking about Mary Grove Conservancy. So that's the CEO, Tom Lumen, that was talking about a new partnership with the University of Michigan to bring 29 undergraduate teachers to the West Side campus. So if people don't know, Mary Grove Conservancy is a big project that a lot of partnerships in the transition of Mary Grove College into like a partnership with UD, the U of M, and a lot of other things to just like create this. I'm gonna say like almost like a special school that exists for kids to go throughout, like a Montessori type of experience for a lot of people in that community. The tough thing is, it doesn't have any students from the community in the school. Like, it's not enough Detroiters. This was lifted up by Angela Whitfield Calloway, my council member, and also the council member in this district, of saying that about the lack of Detroit students benefiting from this LEAP program, and it's supposed to like pour in the public good, learning equity, and problem solving for public good. And it's no Detroiters are part of this inaugural core. And that's extremely upsetting because this is something that is bannered and like waved and talked about how great it is for Detroit to have this. You had a lot of partnership, a little bit of public dollars, but more so like a shift of like these higher learning institutions. And it brings back up that elephant in the room of like, you know, the greatest assets that do exist in programming for Detroit, in Detroit, not necessarily being for Detroiters. So what does that mean?
Yeah, I think this touches on a couple of things. First of all, this is the next step in what has been a pretty major shift in what goes on at Mary Grove College and a major upgrade to its facilities. They built the Early Education Center. They are continuing to renovate these historic, really beautiful buildings. We had an office in Mary Grove for a little bit.
Yeah.
The construction kind of was part of the reason that we left, because it was a lot to kind of deal with when we were trying to get work done. But Mary Grove College, very cool. Really like all of the statues and things like that there. So that's one piece of it. You know, this is a new program with U of M where teachers, undergraduate students will be coming to Detroit to teach students K through 3 while they're getting their degree. It's like a residency program comparable to how doctors go to, you know, get their residency. It was kind of described as like the first in the nation, which I guess I was a little surprised about. It's a pretty interesting idea, though. 29 undergraduate students will be living at Mary Grove in some renovated spaces, and they'll be teaching Detroit students there. Another aspect of this is, yes, there are not any Detroit students who are part of this inaugural group. The goal is to recruit Detroit students to fill at least half of those positions. That did not happen this time around. Whitfield Calloway was not pleased about that, has said that the city needs to do more. The council will try to do more to help recruit students for this program. So there is still these questions of, you know, the investment that's coming, particularly from universities, is that creating opportunities for Detroiters to participate in that? And you would, you know, expect people that are from the community have a better sense of the issues that kids are dealing with, where that's a major part of this program, to actually research and study some of the challenges of the population of the city and use that to inform policy research and things like that. You know, an interesting part of this is that out of the 29 positions, I believe it was 14 are international students and 11 are from out of state. You know, no shade to them, but you know, Mary Grove Conservancy CEO kind of said, well, this is an opportunity for people who are outside of Michigan to see how great Detroit is, and maybe you bring in young people who decide to live here and become teachers in the community. I don't think anybody would have a problem with that necessarily, but it is kind of this interesting dynamic of like, is this going to be something that local students can go to U of M, can get a part of this program, can then, invest in their own community. That's the goal. We'll see if it happens.
It's a tale as old as Detroit time. You know what I'm saying? Great programs that are said to help Detroit exist, but where are the Detroiters? Some of it is, I definitely think like a lot of that understanding in culture, and that connection needed in culture, like who's making those connections. And I'm not saying that nobody there is not, but that's where I'm hoping that I'm communicating some of this stuff through Detroit is Different, so you're understanding some of the layers and the trust needed for things to connect. But as usual, and I know this one we was back and forth as far as like working on some of my tech stuff. Shout out to what we doing here with public comment. But thank you so much. We have a couple different things coming up with Detroit is Different. The Collard Green Cook-Off is coming back soon. That's like gonna be something very soon, June 15th. And a whole lot of other cultural stuff happening. Watch Detroit is Different. It'll be some screenings of some things that I've done. I'm looking forward to what's happening next, but this is a great project. I'm glad that people are out here supporting it. We're putting the bricks in little by little by little. I think that, as I always tell Malachi, this is one of those projects that next year with the local election is going to be extremely interesting for public comment. Because just for you all to know, through this platform, every candidate, I want to get interviewed with the same questions across the board. I would love your support from community to help with that. And when I say every candidate, I'm talking about police commission, everybody that's open to it. I want them to be able to share their 2 cents and give their answers to some of the things that I'm learning, definitely through the insightful Malachi and so much more, staying on the pulse of things. But that's Detroit is Different. What's happening with Bridge Detroit, Malachi?
Yeah, thanks for listening to the show. I really appreciate it. Hopefully we're providing some value for folks and helping to explain some things and not stumbling on ourselves a little bit too much. But we're making things happen over here. Bridgedetroit.com is where you can find all of our stuff. My weekly council notebook goes out Wednesday. It's kind of a shorter version of this conversation. So if you like what you're seeing here and you haven't subscribed, please go subscribe to that. It's free. It'll show up in your inbox. You don't even have to think about it after signing up. It'll just be there for you. And we're responsive to what community members are asking us to look into, what they find important. So really need that constant kind of engagement and feedback with people to make sure that we're on the right track, that we're speaking to things that is important to people. I don't want to be just kind of like dictating what the news is for folks. We want to be serving the public. I will be going up to Mackinac Island next week for the policy conference. So yeah, that's always an interesting opportunity to talk to people, to talk to some powerful people that are otherwise not always easy to get a hold of. If there are things that are on your mind, please hit me up. My email address is out there. It's mbarrett@bridgedetroit.com. But we are out on socials, Bridge Detroit, Instagram, Facebook, all that stuff. And we just want to hear from you.
All right, with that, peace.